Greetings, everyone, and welcome. My name is Tim Kais, and I am the host of God Save the King. Really excited to have you here with me today. Just to kind of put things in perspective here, as I am recording this. Now, I'm recording this. This is going to go out on Friday evening, which will be September 30th, 2022 at 10 p.m. So, as I always say on my show, thank you for joining me, where you can hear my show on the Truth Be Told radio network every Friday at 10 p.m. Eastern. So I am recording this show in anticipation of that event. This coming Friday, September 30th at 10 p.m. is when this show is going to go out. Now, if you are either watching it at another time, like, later on, right after it's been posted on YouTube or something like that, or if you just so happen to be catching me live, because I am putting this out on Facebook, on the Truth Be Told Radio Network Facebook page, and on the God Save the King Facebook page right now. Okay, so right now is just a little bit after 5:30 p.m. on Wednesday, September 28th. You might be catching the show live right now. And that's really cool too. But the reason I am making a big deal out of this is because of the date. That's the reason I'm making a big deal out of this, is because of the date, what day it is, what time it is, and what's going on right now, what time of year it is, because we have just seen a changeover in the Jewish New Year. Okay, we have just seen a changeover in the Jewish New Year. According to Jewish reckoning, it is now, let's see, I got to find the date here, because I'll quote it wrong if I don't look at it. Oh, come on. Sorry, guys. Gotta find it in my notes here. Gotta do this right. That we just made the changeover. Okay, come on. Is it 3757 or 3758? Okay, it's all over the internet. I mean, there's all kinds of people that are watching this right now. So here we go. Okay, so here we go. So that was back then. Okay, so that's not right. Come on. All right, I'm really sorry about this, guys. It's actually kind of embarrassing. I should have had this all fired up and ready to go when I started the show, and I've got my show notes up here on my computer so that I can tell you what's going on, but unfortunately I don't have it right in front of me. Okay, there it is, finally. Okay, so on the Gregorian calendar, today is Wednesday, September 28th, 2022, and it is 5:36 in the late afternoon. But according to the Jewish calendar, this is the year 5783. And I'll explain that more in just a minute, because 2 days ago on Sunday, right, what would have been Sunday the 25th on the Gregorian calendar, at sundown on the 25th of September, 2022, on the Gregorian calendar, is when we would have experienced the beginning of the Hebrew New Year, the beginning of the Hebrew civil New Year, the first day of the month of Tishri. And remember that, according to Jewish reckoning, the new day begins at sundown. It doesn't begin at midnight like we do it. It begins at sundown, and that can make things a little bit tricky, because you got to pay attention to, frankly, two dates at the same time, because the first, what we would call full day, which isn't right, okay, the first full day of Tishri 1 would have been Monday the 26th, but no, that's actually not correct. The first half of the day, according to Jewish reckoning, occurs at night in darkness, which is because that's why it says in Genesis, and the evening and the morning were the first day. Okay, all through the first chapter of Genesis, and the evening and the morning were the first day, and the evening and the morning were the second day, etc., etc. So they reckon time according to the book of Genesis, the Hebrew scriptures, that evening, the nighttime, comes 1st. So when the sun sets and you go through, approximately 12 hours of darkness, that is the beginning of the quote unquote day. And then the remainder of the day is what occurs during sunlight. And then the day ends as the sun goes down and you start a new day. So on Sunday at sunset was the final day of the Hebrew month of Elul, and then began the first day of the Hebrew month of Tishri, which is the first month of their civil calendar, but the 7th month of the religious calendar. And all of this is significant. And the reason I'm bringing this up, if you've been catching my show for the past 3 weeks, we did something a little bit different and a little bit special, where I was interviewed by the CEO of the Truth Be Told Radio Network, Mr. Kevin Gallagher, and we spent 3 weeks talking about the relationship between the first day of the civil new year, Tishri 1, and the Nativity. What's the connection? And that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to take my time and explain this, slowly and accurately as possible so people can understand what's going on here, because it was right now at this time of year, is when Jesus was born. He was not born in the winter. He was born in the fall. And according to a lunar calendar, he was born basically 3 days ago, because here where I am here on the east coast of the United States, it's about 5:40 p.m., which means the sun's going to go down in, about an hour, roughly, right around 6:45-ish is about when the sun's going to set. So this would have been the equivalent, but about 3 days ago, this time of year that Jesus would have been born. And that's really exciting to put the different pieces of the puzzle together so that we get a better picture of what really happened. Because to remind you, my ministry, my website, my Facebook page, my YouTube page, they are all called God Save the King. And God Save the King is a pun. It's a play on words because, in ancient times and then all the way up through, certainly through the Middle Ages and almost to modern times, the phrase God Save the King or Long Live the King has been a way of extolling the monarch. And frankly, we're seeing that again right now with the fact that Queen Elizabeth of England just passed away and that Charles is now the King of England. And I even posted on the God Save the King Facebook page, I posted a video of the song, the British national anthem, God Save the King, being sung for the first time in how long? In how long has it been? Because it's always been God Save the Queen up until now, and now it's God Save the King again. So interesting little play on words going on here, because as I've said, this was a way of extolling the king that's been going on for certainly hundreds, if frankly not thousands of years, that the members of the court, the members of the royal court at the appropriate time would either individually or collectively extol the king by saying God Save the King or Long Live the King or Long May he reign or something like that. So that's where the title of my ministry comes from, because we are again engaging in a pun. Well, which king are we looking at? Are we looking at the Roman appointed so-called king of the Jews, Herod the Great, or are we looking at the legitimate king of the Jews, Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus the Messiah, descended from David, who was born in Bethlehem on, here you go, on the Feast of Trumpets, on Tishri 1, the first day of the civil new year. Now, how do we know that? Well, let's talk about this. Let me take a second here, just kind of rather clumsily, and get my my screen share going up here, and find the come on, let's do this. Oh boy, we got to do this. Okay, give me a sec here, guys. Sorry about this. Once again, should have been a little more prepared for this. Let's try that. No? Yes? No? Oh, come on. Want to try to get my screen share up here so you can see this. See if that does it. No? Oh, of course not. Sorry, guys. I should have done this beforehand to get this all set. Let me get over here. Let's try this. And let's do that and this. There we go. That should do it. That should do it. Let me try this. Get the old screen share up here. Give me one sec, guys. Boom. Boom. There we go. All right. Now, so let's get back over here. There we go. Perfect. That is what I needed to do. So now what this is a shot, a screenshot from an astronomy program called Starry Night. So thank you most abundantly to the folks at Starry Night that came up with this software. This is, layman's astronomy software. So you can type in different search parameters and see what the sky would look like on any given night, now, in the future, and in the past. So what this is the western horizon visible from Jerusalem on September 11th of 3 BC. Now you can look at the picture and take note of the fact that I have put, I'm going to get my cursor up here, or try to anyway, maybe not. Take note of the fact that the sun is actually well above the horizon. So this is actually a somewhat inaccurate depiction here, but I have done this to make it easier to see. That's the reason I have done this way, is that what you really want to do is imagine that the sun is right at the horizon, that it's actually setting and starting to dip below the horizon. But take note that the setting sun here is in the middle of the body of Virgo, the woman. And we see this referenced in Revelation chapter 12 in verse 1, where we read that John saw a great sign in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon underneath her feet. And that's what we see right here. It's the constellation Virgo with the setting sun in the middle of her body, and then the setting moon is actually over here just slightly to the left, underneath her feet, between her feet and the horizon. So this is part of that sign. It is a woman clothed with the sun and the moon underneath her feet. Now, the scripture continues and it says, and on her head was a crown of 12 thorns. Or thorns, my God, crown of thorns. You can tell where I want to go with this, but that's not what's going on. On her head was a crown of 12 stars. Now, you can't see it in this depiction, but quote unquote, above her head, which would be below the horizon, is the constellation Leo. Now, Leo, each of the 12 constellations corresponds to one of the 12 tribes of Israel. So the constellation Leo, the lion, connects to the tribe of Judah. And that is why Jesus in the book of Revelation is called the Lion of the tribe of Judah, is it's making this connection. Leo, the lion, represents the tribe of Judah, and therefore it is the royal constellation because it represents the royal tribe. Because if you go back to Genesis 49, verse it's either 10 or 11, is where Jacob is prophesying over his sons, and he prophesies over Judah, and he tells Judah that he is a lion's whelp, etc., etc. See, there you go. He's a lion's whelp, and that the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet until Shiloh comes. Now that is another description in Scripture of an astronomical sign, and these two signs are occurring in the heavens at the same time on this day. So this is how we are able to pinpoint when Jesus was born, is because these two signs are both in the sky on the same day. Now, I'm choosing my words here very carefully because they're not both in the sky at the same time. You actually can't see Leo and Virgo in the sky at the same time, because in order to do that, the sun has to be set. It's got to be dark out. Okay. It has to be dark out in order to see both of them at the same time, because if the sun is up above the horizon, number one, you're not going to be able to see them at all because it's daylight and you can't see the constellations in daylight. You can only see them at night. But as they relate to sunrise and sunset, you can actually only see one of them at a time. So if you were to actually, so in keeping with what I mentioned earlier about how the evening and the morning were the first day, well, this is the evening. Okay. And so what an ancient astronomer would have done is he would have gone outside at about this time. See, because this picture, if we look at how it is depicted right here, the sun is still well above the horizon. So you really wouldn't be able to see much of this constellation at all. You might be able to see the star Spica, because Spica is an extremely bright star. So as soon as you start to lose a little bit of the daylight, Spica probably was able to be discerned, in the night sky. Plus, you got to remember that the ancient astronomers, they knew math, they knew geometry to a certain degree, and they could count. So they would know using mathematics what day this would appear. That was not a mystery to them, but they used a combination of mathematics and visual observation to verify their findings. So they wouldn't have gone off of only mathematics. They would have known mathematically that this sign was there, but then they would have gone outside and they said, okay, now we got to see it, right? So what they would have done is in the late afternoon, they would have gone outside and they would have started watching as the sun starts to set. So as the sun is setting and as they're losing daylight, that means the constellation of Virgo is going to start to become visible. And then not only are the stars of the constellation Virgo going to start to become visible, but also the moon is going to start to become visible. And this is very provocative because on this date, this is another one of the reasons that we can come to a reasonable conclusion that Jesus was born on this date, is because the moon is going to start to appear. And on this occasion, it is the teeny sliver of a new moon. So Jewish observers, Jewish astronomical observers would have been outside an hour before sunset, watching the sun go down and looking for what are called the horns of the moon, looking for the little tip of the sliver of the new moon. Because then once two of them had reported this to the Sanhedrin, then the Sanhedrin could make the official declaration that it was officially New Year's Day. It was officially the first day of Tishri. It was officially the Day of Trumpets, Yom Teruah, and that it was officially Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year. So, but it required the Sanhedrin to declare that it is so, but it required two independent witnesses to see this in order to go to the Sanhedrin and report to the Sanhedrin that this would be the case. So that's what would have been happening late in the afternoon on September 11th of 3 BC, the final day of the month of Elul, heading into the first day of the month of Tishri, is you would have had men outside watching the sunset very earnestly to witness the new moon and report it to the Sanhedrin. And that would have been the evening. Now, by this time, because Leo is above the head of the virgin, is above the head of the woman, and therefore a crown, because remember, it's the royal tribe, therefore it's the royal sign, therefore symbolically we have every reason to consider it a crown because it's royal. Because it's above her head, it's already below the horizon. You can't see it. You can't see it. But approximately 12 hours from now, if we turn around and we look at the eastern horizon, starting in darkness, and then watching as the sun starts to come up and the sun starts to get brighter and brighter and brighter. At first, we can see everything very clearly because it's dark. But then as the sun comes up, we'll increasingly not be able to see because the brightness of the sun will occlude the nighttime stars. We won't be able to see the stars anymore. But if we go out about an hour before sunrise and we look at the eastern horizon, what do we see? Well, we see the constellation of Leo. That's what we see. So this absolutely corresponds to, and the evening and the morning were the first day, because you would go outside and you would look at the evening observation to get that, and then you would go outside 12 hours later and look at the morning observation to get that, and then you would be able to put the two signs together in your head and say, oh, well, that is a woman clothed with the sun, and on her head is a crown of stars. Now let's talk more about the crown of stars here for a moment, because the constellation Leo normally only has 9 naked eye observable stars. So if we're doing that morning observation, right? See, and so the following morning still would have been Tishri 1. See, in our thinking, it's the next day, because to us, the day changes at midnight, but that's not how the Hebrews did it. To them, the new day began at sunset. So the following morning is still the same day to them. Okay, so in our reckoning, the following morning would have been September 12th. Okay, would have been September 12th, but all of that still would have been Tishri 1 on the Hebrew calendar. It still would have been Yom Teruah. It still would have been Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year, the day of trumpets, when they blow trumpets announcing the coronation of the king. And we're going to talk more about that, but I've already kind of tipped my hand. This is why it is so significant that Jesus would actually be born on this day, was because this was the day, at the very least, they reckoned their regnal years. In other words, they reckoned the reign of the king from the first day of Tishri, right? And then oftentimes they would actually literally crown the king on the first day of Tishri, if and when they could actually do that. So once again, in the evening, on the evening of September 11th of 3 BC, roughly 6:30 p.m., 6:45 p.m., on the western horizon from Jerusalem, if you were doing the evening observation, you would have watched the sun go down, you would have watched the night increase, the darkness increase. It becomes dusk, twilight, and then dusk, and then the darkness increases. The sun is in the middle of the woman's body, but then the sun dips below the horizon, and then you can see the moon underneath her feet. So that part of the sign would have been visible only during the evening observation. But then again, like I said, 12 hours later, if we go out and we start observing the morning observation in darkness before the sun comes up, at what we will see is we will see the constellation Leo, and we are able to note that there are 9 naked eye observable stars. But on this date, there were also 3 planets in Leo, making a total of 12 stars. So it would have been a crown of 12 stars. But then in addition, one of those 3 planets that were in Leo on that day was the planet Jupiter, and the planet Jupiter was in conjunction with the star Regulus. And this is all going on the same day. It's all going on the same day. So we have a New Testament scripture and we have an Old Testament scripture that when we put them together, we have 2 witnesses. See, so we're coming back to that theme, the 2 witnesses. And because remember, in Old Testament scripture, it says, in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, let every word be established. So that's what we're seeing here, is we are seeing two witnesses, again, a different kind of two witnesses. We are seeing two witnesses from Scripture. We're seeing two witnesses in the morning and the evening observation to put this picture together, because it is going to tell us when Jesus was born. Because in Revelation 12:1 and 2, we read, like I said, behold, a great sign in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon underneath her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. And she travailed in pain to be delivered. And then she brought forth a man-child who is to rule the nations with a rod of iron. So this sign that is given, this is the sign of the birth of the Mashiach Nagid. This is the sign of the birth of Jesus Christ declared in Scripture. Now, it's declared in a very interesting fashion. It's not declared outright. It is declared in a cryptic fashion. And that is because Jewish interpretation of Scripture allows for this. In Hebrew hermeneutics, every Bible verse can have as many as 4 levels of interpretation. Okay, let me say that again. According to Hebrew hermeneutics, each verse of the Bible may have as many as 4 levels of interpretation. Now, I am not a Hebrew expert, so I may mispronounce these words, so forgive me. But the first level is called the Peshat. Okay, P-E-S-H-A-T, Peshat or Peshat, Peshat. Not sure where the emphasis goes on that, where the accent goes. But the Peshat or the Peshat refers to the plain, direct, intended, explicit meaning of the verse. So, of course, a classic example of that would be, Jesus wept. So that means Jesus wept. Okay, it means he cried, right? Or whatever. Okay, so it's the direct meaning of the verse. But now the second level is what's called the remez, okay, or remez, R-E-M-E-Z. Now, this is the second level. Now, the word remez in Hebrew means a hint. So it's referring to the implied meaning or the alluded meaning or a symbolic meaning. A symbolic meaning. Okay. So is there a symbol involved? And the one that pops into my head, here's a better one. How about the record where Jesus curses the fig tree? Right? This would be a great verse to parse out using Hebrew hermeneutics, because the literal version, of course, right, the first level, the Peshat, the plain, direct, intended, explicit meaning is that Jesus literally walks up to a fig tree and curses the fig tree. Okay, it's literal. It's absolutely literal. He walks up to a tree, speaks to a tree, and says, "No man eat fruit of thee hereafter for an age." Curses the fig tree, right? Okay, well, second level is the remez. So the remez, like I said, means a hint, right? So it's the implied, alluded, or symbolic meaning. So is there a symbol in this verse? Is there a symbol in this record? And the answer to that is yes. What does the fig tree symbolize? And if you go through Scripture, what you will discover is that the fig tree symbolizes religious Israel. There are 3 trees in the Bible that are symbolic of the nation of Israel, and they are each symbolic of the nation of Israel in a different way. So they are the fig tree, the olive tree, and the grapevine. So the grapevine is symbolic of geopolitical Israel. That is the symbolism there, right? So whenever you see the vineyard being spoken of, that is symbolic of geopolitical Israel, right? Now, whenever you see the fig tree being spoken of, that is symbolic of religious Israel, as is also symbolized by the temple. So you can make connections between the fig tree and the temple and the whole Jewish religious system, the fig tree, right? And then the final one is the olive tree. The olive tree, of course, is symbolic of spiritual Israel, or in other words, faithful Israel or believing Israel. So you can go chase those down. That's a lot of fun. That's a great Bible study for you to go chase down. But in light of what we're discussing here, the different levels of Jewish interpretation, in the record where Jewish curses the fig tree, the first level, the Peshat, is Jesus literally cursing a tree. He walks up to the tree, he talks to the tree, and he says, no man eat fruit of thee hereafter for an age. All right, it says forever in the King James, but it means for an age, for a duration of time, right? Second level is the remez, which is the hint or the implication or the symbolism. Well, the symbolism is religious Israel. So he's not cursing just a fig tree. He is cursing religious Israel and prophesying to the nation of Israel that they are not going to bring forth fruit for an age, right? Which brings us into the third level, which is called the Darash, D-E-R-A-S-H, Darash. I'm assuming that's how you pronounce it, Darash, which means in Hebrew, that means to inquire or seek, which means this is the interpretive meaning or the comparative meaning, the homiletical meaning, which I've actually already been doing that, because what we would do is we would compare this record about fig trees to other records about fig trees in order to get the interpretation and the application of this verse by understanding all the different places where a fig tree is referenced, right? Because you've got Jesus cursing the fig tree, then you've got Jesus giving the sign of the fig tree. Later on in the Olivet discourse, he says, when you see, because, and it's corresponding, because he says, when you see the fig tree bearing fruit, you know that summer is at hand. Oh, isn't that interesting, right? So he curses the fig tree, and then he prophesies the restoration of the fig tree. But now here we go. The fourth level is called the sod, or the sod, S-O-D, and it means the secret or mystical or esoteric or cryptic meaning of the verse. The cryptic meaning of the verse, okay? So now in using the example we're using of Jesus cursing the fig tree, well, what is the cryptic meaning? Well, the cryptic meaning is also prophetic, which is that Jesus isn't just cursing a tree, he's cursing the nation of Israel, and he's cursing them because they denied him as their Messiah. So that is the cryptic meaning, the esoteric meaning, the mystical meaning behind all of that. But the reason I bring all of this up as an example is because we're looking at Revelation chapter 12, verse 1, about the woman clothed with the sun and the moon underneath her feet. So the fourth level, the sod or the sod, right, the cryptic or the mystical esoteric meaning is that you need to recognize and understand. And this is Revelation 12:1 combined with Genesis 49:10 and 11, talking about the scepter not departing from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, because that is a reference, that phrase, the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet. Let me explain that. The scepter is a reference to the planet Jupiter, because the planet Jupiter was known throughout classical antiquity as the king planet. Okay, listen to me. Listen to that again. The planet Jupiter was known throughout classical antiquity as the king planet. So in Hebrew, that Jupiter was known as Tzedek, which is a derivation of the word for righteousness. So it's the king planet, and it's the planet of righteousness. It symbolizes the king of righteousness. That is what Jupiter symbolizes. So Jupiter, symbolizing the king of righteousness, is in the royal sign Leo, the lion of the tribe of Judah. Okay, you're starting to get the picture here? So this is not coincidence. This is not just happenstance that this stuff lines up like this. But remember, I also mentioned the fact that in reference to Genesis 49:10 and 11, the scepter, which means Jupiter, the scepter will not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet until Shiloh comes. See, what can this be other than a very cryptic meaning and cryptic interpretation of this verse? but you have to look at a star chart. And unfortunately, I'm not going to spend the time to find my graphic of this. I've got the graphic. I should be able to look it up really quick, but let's see if I can find it very, very, very fast. If I can find it very fast, that would be great. I doubt that I can. Let me see if I can find it real quick. No. Okay. So I should have been better prepared. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Should have been able to put this one up on the screen for you. But if you look at a pictorial representation of Leo, of the lion, the star Regulus is between his feet. See, and that's not a coincidence. The star Regulus is between his feet. And this is very, very interesting because the star Regulus has two meanings. Number one, it comes at least in part from the Hebrew word regel, which means feet. Okay, it means feet. So Regulus, regel, means feet, and we always understand that the king reigns wherever he puts his feet. Heavens are your throne, and the earth is your footstool. Wherever the king puts his feet is where he reigns. See, so this is, once again, this is not coincidence. But the other meaning of Regulus, which is a star, okay? So you've got Jupiter, which is the king planet. Now you've got Regulus, which is the king star. See, regel, regal, the word regal, not a coincidence. It's the king star, and it was known throughout classical antiquity as the king star, and they are in conjunction on this day in the morning observation. So in the morning observation, Jupiter and Regulus are in conjunction. So the king planet and the king star are in conjunction in the royal sign, which is making a crown above the head of the woman clothed with the sun and the moon underneath her feet. Okay, so this is not, once again, this is not a coincidence. The fact that it lied, now if we had to stretch this, if we had to go through all kinds of gyrations to make this make sense, that would be very different. But notice that this is all dropping into place quite easily, because if you punch this into a computer like I've done, you discovered that this occurred on September 11th of 3 BC. All right. What you're seeing here is a pictorial representation of the western horizon visible from Jerusalem on September 11th of 3 BC. Now we're looking at it here at something like 5 in the afternoon. We really need to be looking at it at like 6:45, like I said, with the sun right on the horizon. But I did it like this so it would be easier to see the sign, and half of it wouldn't be, not visible anymore because it's underneath the horizon. But the part that is underneath the horizon is Leo, the lion, which will become visible in the morning as part of the morning observation. And then, like I said, you've got to take the two pictures and put them together in your head to get a woman clothed with the sun and the moon underneath her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. But like I said, it's not a coincidence that the crown of 12 stars is 9 NEO stars, 9 naked eye observable stars, plus 3 planets, and that one of those planets is the planet Jupiter, which is the king planet. And it just so happens to be in conjunction with the star Regulus, which is the king star. So you've got the king planet and the king star in conjunction in the royal sign, the lion of the tribe of Judah, making a crown above the head of the woman clothed with the sun. Now, I was mentioning the fact that Regulus has two meanings. One of those meanings is feet. So wherever the king puts his feet is where the king reigns. But the other meaning is that Regulus, as the king star, would have also been called Melech. And Melech is simply the Hebrew word for king. But take note that if you put Jupiter and Regulus together in Hebrew, you would get Melech Tzedek, or in other words, Melchizedek, right? So if you run the two words together, you would get Melchizedek, which is a reference to this very interesting figure from the Old Testament, okay, who met Abraham coming back from the Battle of the Five Kings. He meets Abraham, and Abraham pays tithes to him. And throughout the Old Testament, he's this very mysterious figure because we don't know much about him until you get to the New Testament, where in the book of Hebrews, it is explained who Melchizedek was, and that Jesus, therefore, is called a priest forever and a king forever after the order of Melchizedek. So, more coincidence going on here. A priest forever and a king forever after the order of Melchizedek. And it's all occurring on September 11th of 3 BC. But that, once again, that's the Gregorian date. What's the Hebrew date? Well, if you plug it into the calendar like this, what you discover is that the Hebrew date is Tishri 1. It is Yom Teruah. It is Rosh Hashanah. It is the head of the year. It is the Hebrew civil New Year. So what this means is that as Jesus was being born in Bethlehem, 6 miles away in the temple in Jerusalem, they were blowing shofars announcing his birth, unknowingly announcing his birth. Now, it gets even deeper, okay? It gets even deeper because there is a Hebrew tradition that the first day of Tishri actually connects with the creation record. Okay, so and this is interesting because you've got little bits and pieces that tie this into God Save the King, and tie it into the Nativity, and tie it into the fact that Jesus was born at this time. So in the 2nd century, so if you go back and you look at Jewish history, after Jesus's public ministry, so he is born, he lives for 33 and a half years, he's crucified, he's buried, he's resurrected, he ascends into heaven, and then 40 years later, roughly, is when you get the destruction of the temple, the war with Rome, and the destruction of the temple. And then approximately 65 years after that is when you get the city of Jerusalem just being leveled by the Romans in the Bar Kokhba revolt. And as a result, the Jewish nation is trying to adapt to the fact that the temple has been destroyed and the city of Jerusalem has been destroyed. So what do? How do they maintain their religious practices when the temple is gone and the holy city is basically destroyed? So interestingly enough, it was also around this time is when it's been going on for a couple of hundred years at this point, but the synagogue started to get introduced, right, to replace the temple. And then rabbinic Judaism was coming into play very heavily. So in the 2nd century of the Common Era, there lived in the Mishnaic period, there lived a Hebrew sage, Rabbi Yosef ben Halafta. And I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Rabbi Yosef or Jose, it's spelled Y-O-S-E. It's pretty clearly a derivation of Yosef or Joseph, right? Yosef, right? Ben Halafta, I'm guessing is how you pronounce his last name. Well, he was a rabbi and a Hebrew sage who lived in the 2nd century after Christ. And he lived, get ready for this, he lived in the city of Sepphoris in Galilee, because this is part of where they allowed the priests to live after the destruction of the temple. And then again, also after the destruction of the city of Jerusalem, is that the members of the Sanhedrin and the priests, they needed a place to go and a place to live to try to maintain their traditions. And one of those locations was the city of Sepphoris. So Rabbi Joseph, right? Yosef. Yeah, it's got to be Yosef ben Halafta. What he did is he did an investigation of the book of Genesis, and he determined that the beginning of the creation occurred on the 25th day of Elul. And then if you do the math, that puts the first day of Tishri on the 6th day of the creation record. So if the first day of the creation record was Elul 25, then the first day of Tishri was on the 6th day of creation. And of course, the 6th day of creation, that is the day that humanity was created. That's the day that humanity was created. And then also, according to Jewish tradition, part of what happened here is the fact that when Adam was created, that the first thing Adam did was he spoke. All right. So God creates him. He creates him fully functioning. And the first thing Adam does when he wakes up, so to speak, or, becomes alive and becomes aware, wakes up, he speaks a sentence, and he says, and he, according to Hebrew tradition, which you won't find this in the Bible, you've got to find this in the Talmud and the Mishnah, is that he says, truly God is king of the universe. Truly thou art king of the universe. And then God responds by saying, yes, truly now the world will know that I am king. And then this corresponds to the statement made in Genesis 1:31, where it says, and God saw all that he had created, and behold, it was very good. So this little conversation, these couple of quick statements by Adam and then by God about being king, combined with the fact that it's the 6th day and that humanity is, check this out, pun intended here, pun intended, that humanity is the crowning achievement. It's God's crowning achievement, okay, is that all of these pieces put together formulate the understanding that God is being crowned king of the universe on the 6th day of creation. God is being crowned king of the universe on Tishri 1. See, so now it makes a whole lot more sense to understand why. Why did they reckon their regnal years from their civil new year instead of their religious new year? Now, we can make an educated guess and say, well, that's because the king was a civil authority as opposed to a religious authority. So, of course, that makes sense that they would, crown kings on the 1st of Tishri and or reckon their regnal years, reckon their reign from the first day of the civil new year, because it's a civil ruler. But it turns out that it's actually much deeper. It's actually much, much deeper. And in addition, another reason it's deeper, and this takes us back to those Hebrew interpretation again, because Hebrew interpretation is quite different than Western interpretation. They allow certain things and find certain things significant that we would not necessarily find significant. So, for example, the sod, the secret meaning, the cryptic meaning, the fact that appears to be referring to an astronomical sign. Well, that's definitely a cryptic meaning. That's definitely a hidden meaning. Well, another hidden meaning, okay, another cryptic meaning, in other words, literally in code, right, is that they allow for word games and puns and things like that. So, for example, we've all read in the book of Genesis in English, okay, and in English it doesn't seem to make sense. So track with me here. We've all read how in the book of Genesis that Adam called his wife Eve because she was the mother of all living. Okay, well, okay, I don't get it. I don't understand. Why did he call her Eve? Because she was the mother of all living. That doesn't make sense to me. Well, that's because it's in English and it's not in Hebrew. And once again, I'm not a Hebrew expert, so I'm not going to butcher the pronunciation here. As a matter of fact, I'm not even going to try to pronounce it at all. I'm just going to give you the equivalent in English, because what's going on here is a pun. What's going on here is that the Hebrew word for living and the Hebrew word for Eve, right, which I think is Hava, isn't, I believe it is, right? Chava, Chavah, Chava, is that the word for to live or for living is extremely similar. They sound very, very much the same. So according to Hebrew hermeneutics, those two ideas are now significantly interrelated because they sound the same. To them, that is a legitimate Hebraic interpretive technique. We might go, oh, that's just a coincidence that they kind of sound alike. No, it's not a coincidence. It's deliberate because when they sound alike, they're interrelated. So to give you the equivalent in English, it would be, we don't use this name for women very much anymore, but we used to use the name Livy, Livy, possibly as a variation on Elizabeth, possibly, right? Or Olivia, right? Livy for short, Livy, right? And once again, what I'm driving at here is the English equivalent because it would sound the same. It doesn't mean that the etymology is the same. It just means that they sound the same, right? So in English, it would be, and Adam called her Livy because she was the mother of all living. See, that would be how it would sound in English if we had done it right. In order to get the gist of it, in order to get the sod, in order to get the cryptic interpretation, you would have to say it that way. And Adam called her Livy because she was the mother of all living, okay? Now, I use that as an illustration because the one I want to point out is the fact that they also allowed word games, right? Anagrams and things like that. So if you take the letters, okay, if you take the letters in Hebrew, by the way, of course, in Hebrew, by the way, if you take the letters for the very first word of the Bible, which is Bereshit, and that's the Hebrew word that is translated in the beginning, and you take the words, or take the letters rather, of Bereshit, and you rearrange them, you can get the phrase Aleph Tishri. Aleph Tishri. In other words, by switching the letters around in Bereshit, you get the phrase the first of Tishri. So according to Hebraic understanding, that's not an accident. That's not a coincidence. That is deliberate. That is telling us that in the beginning, when God created the heavens and earth, that occurred on the first day of Tishri, and in particular, that the first day of Tishri corresponds to the creation of humanity, which is God's crowning achievement, which de facto is part of what makes him king. And then, like I said, you've got this additional conversation going on between Adam and God, talking about how God is now king of the universe and that it's recognized. Adam is recognizing God as king of the universe, and he's recognizing him as king of the universe on the first day of Tishri. So the first day of Tishri is the day that God is coronated as king. So there it is. It makes complete sense now look at the significance of Jesus of Nazareth being born on the first of Tishri. So now what you've got to do is you've got to put all of these components and put them together, because you've got Joseph and Mary, Joseph and Miriam living in Bethlehem. See, and I haven't talked, you got to go to other shows I've done to understand this. You've got the prophecy about Jesus being born in Bethlehem, right? And Joseph and Mary, they moved from Nazareth to Bethlehem to fulfill that prophecy. That was the reason they left. It had less to do with the taxation and the registration than we really think. They moved there to fulfill the prophecy that Jesus would be born in Bethlehem. They were both of the house and lineage of David, right? And then now you've got the woman clothed with the sun and the moon underneath her feet on the western horizon in the evening. Then you've got on her head the crown of 12 stars occurring during the morning observation, but then during the evening observation, as that sign is observable during the night sky, we are also told that shepherds were watching their flocks by night in open field, which, based upon where Bethlehem is located, directly to the east of Bethlehem is a low, at that time, would have been a low valley, which is where you would have had wheat and barley fields and stuff like that. It's where the fields of Boaz would have been, right? Where Ruth would have gleaned in the fields of Boaz. And then just beyond those fields would have been the beginning of the Judean wilderness, see, which was the perfect environment for shepherds. So somewhere either in those fields or right beyond them in the wilderness is where the shepherds were hanging out. So you've got all of this going on at the same time. A woman called to the sun, the moon underneath her feet. 12 hours later, the crown of 12 stars. You got shepherds watching their flocks in open field, see, an open field at night, okay, which they wouldn't have done that in winter. We've been over that, right? But then 6 miles away in Jerusalem, in the temple in Jerusalem, they are blowing ram's horns, shofars, announcing the birth and the coronation of the king, because it is the first day of Tishri, which is the day that God is crowned king of the universe. So it makes complete sense that he would bring his son into the world on that day, Aleph Tishri, the first day of Tishri, the day that the Jews coronate their kings. So, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Tim Keyes. I want to thank you for joining me on God Save the King. You can hear my show every Friday night at 10 p.m. on the Truth Be Told radio network. Once again, thank you for joining me. We will see you next week. God Save the King.